Kenapa tadi Bu Riri? Oh, rekam ya? Oke, mohon maaf tadi. Oke. Baik, kalau begitu, sebentar ya. Bisa mendengar suara saya dengan baik?
Oke.
Oke, baik kalau gitu. Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam. Selamat malam bagi semuanya. Semoga kita selalu dalam keadaan sehat walafiat. Pada malam hari ini kita kedatangan dua tamu guest lecturer untuk malam ini di kuliah tamu mata kuliah Pemugaran, yaitu dengan Bapak Jonathan Poh dan Yann Follain, yang dua-duanya dari WYTO Group. Sebelum acara dimulai, izinkan kami untuk memberikan kata-kata sambutan dari Ketua Program Program Studi Magister Arsitektur Universitas Trisakti, yaitu Ibu Dr. Maria Immaculata Riri Wulandari. Yang kedua nanti akan dilanjuti dengan kegiatan materi kuliah tamu yang yang akan dimoderatorkan oleh Ibu Lucia Helly Purwaningsi. Kemudian akan ditutup oleh Bapak Punto Wijayanto. Kemudian semoga kegiatan ini memberikan manfaat bagi kita semua. Oke, untuk tidak berpanjang lebar, kami persilahkan kepada Ibu Maria untuk memberikan kata sambutan. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Retno. Selamat malam semuanya, mahasiswa. Di sini juga ada alumni. Yann and Jonathan, we have alumni here too from Magister Arsitektur. Some of them here, and we have college from other university too. So we all will learn from you about your project in Singapore. So thank you for being willing to share your experience about your adaptive reuse project. And kita berharap semoga diskusi ini ya nanti bisa bermanfaat buat teman-teman semuanya, terutama mahasiswa Magister. So thank you Yann and Jonathan, and have a nice fruitful discussion. Oke, makasih Mbak Retna.
Terima kasih Ibu Riri atas sambutannya. Sebelum saya sambungkan ke Ibu Lucia, sekedar menginformasikan bahwa Ibu Lucia Helly ini memperoleh gelar S1-nya dari Universitas Gadjah Mada, kemudian gelar S2-nya dari Institut Teknologi Bandung, dan program S3-nya dari Universitas Parahyangan. Beliau dosen aktif di Universitas Trisakti, jurusan arsitektur sejak tahun 92, dan beliau kepada Ibu, mohon maaf ini saya ada gangguan sebentar. Oke, kepada Ibu Lucia, kami persilahkan. Halo Ibu Lucia.
Terima kasih Bu Retna. Sebentar saya baca contekan. Oke. Mungkin Mas Punto nanti bisa menyajikan share screen-nya CV. Ya, terima kasih. Terima kasih. Selamat malam, the honorable our guest lecturers, Mr. Yann Follain and Mr. Jonathan Poh. I also thank you, Ibu Riri Winandari as a head of Magister Architecture program, and Bapak Punto as secretary that has facilitated this event. And also Bapak Ibu, all of students of Restoration of Historic Buildings and Environment class, Magister Arsitektur program, Faculty of Civil Engineering and Building Trisakti University, and other participants who attended this evening. Thank you for being willing to attend the guest lecturer in the class of Restoration for Historic Buildings and Environments. Before the presentation, I will read portfolio of WYTO Group and CV Mr. Yann Follain and Mr. Jonathan Poh. WTO Group goes beyond to create valued experiences through urban landscapes, visual communication, exhibition spaces, cultural curation, and heritage conservation. The fundamental basis to consciously design for the people and the planet has propelled WTO Group full service endeavors and inspired the partners all over Europe and Asia. WTO Group design, innovate, and pioneer solutions with the vision to influence behavior and build an inclusive atmosphere for a resilient future. The combined desire for a sustainable world has informed WYTO Group methodologies and collaborative spirit and tailor-fit formulas both meet needs and respect the natural context to promote green energy. Committed to enriching lives in WTO Group interventions, the collaborate and the mitigation of societal global challenges in urbanism and the built environment, and by garnering inventive approaches together with humanity and responsible use of resources, can solution be made relevant in existing habitats. And CV Mr. Follain is the founder of WYTO Singapore practice and co-founder of WYTO Architects in Paris. He was named together with Pauline Gaudry, co-founder of WYTO Architects in Paris, one of Europe's most important and emerging young architects and designers in Europe, under 40 for 2016 by European Center for Architecture, Art Design, and Urban Studies and the Chicago Atheneum Museum of Architecture and Design. He has built a rich multicultural experience from his formative years in Indonesia, France, and Singapore. Embracing multidisciplinary approaches to growth, the Singapore practice has established Yann's diverse expertise in sustainable architecture, cultural curation, and exhibition design. Together with his team, WYTO received the Future Maker Award at the Beijing Global Innovation Conference and honorable mention at the International Red Dot Design Competition in 2016, and finalists at the INDA Awards in 2017, 2018, and 2019. He is frequent speaker on tropical sustainability and museum curation in the region and has been appointed Festival Director of Archifest 2018 Singapore Architecture Festival. Mr. Yann is also an associate member of the Singapore Institute Architects since 2013 and served as a member of advisory and commissioning panel for the Public Art Trust within the National Art Council Singapore from 2015 to 2017. He is the current co-chair of the Society for Experiential Graphic Designs, one of the 5 curators at Art in Transit by Land Transport Authority for the new MRT lines, as well as a member of the International Council of Museums since 2017. He received his Master of Architecture degree from one of France's leading institutions, the National Architecture School of Higher Education of Paris, Fulfil in 2005. Okay, we can see in Mr. Yann Follan's CV, he has a lot of experience in roles of as architect, urban design, and urban conservator, curator, moderator, master's program lecturer. And the speaker Mr. Jonathan is the newest member of the WTO partnership, bringing in his expertise as a registered architect. He received his Master of Architecture degree from National University of Singapore. He's more widely known for leading an initiative to save Dakota Crescent's post-war SIT estate, following the announcement to redevelop the area 2014, and produced a comprehensive conservation report that was instrumental in convincing the Member of Parliament to file a motion to conserve the area. Mr. Jonathan continues to be actively involved in heritage work with the Docomomo in Singapore chapter, persuading stakeholders to conserve notable modern landmarks. He also teaches as an adjunct lecturer at Temasek Polytechnic's Design School in a hope to inspire the next generation to be passionate and authentic designers for tomorrow. He was also recently co-opted as an executive committee member of the Singapore Heritage Society. His design values aligns with WTO's aspirations to design with a cause, which is evident in his passion in taking action to conserve Singapore's modern heritage and preserve the collective memories and community fabric of Singaporeans. It is in the same vein that led him to various collaborations with WTO, like the Founders Memorial Architecture Competition, Paya Lebar Air-Based Studies Competition, and several other projects that further articulated the convergence of values. His commitment to designing for time and people has proven to be a great asset for the WTO's next leap to the future. Okay, now the presentation session. The presentation of Mr. Yann Follain will take place about 20 minutes, then continued with Mr. Jonathan's presentation for about 20 minutes also. Then will be followed by a question and answer session about 30 minutes. Okay. To shorten the time, let's head over to the presentation session for Mr. Yann Follain and Mr. Jonathan Poh. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this great introduction, and thank you for having us tonight. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I hope that in the future we will be able to do it in real life in Jakarta. I have really great memories of Trisakti University because I came before, and I hope that this will be able to start again. So I will share the screen here. All right. So now you can see the screen. So today's talk is about conservation through sensitive adaptive reuse in Singapore. So I will just remind a little bit about, like you already explained about WITO. We say WITO actually, and so WITO. I'm sure that Punto might know why it is WITO, because the To is a little bit of my Indonesian name, Yanto, when I used to live in Yogyakarta. So we founded it in 2010, and in Singapore, and then in France in 2012, and in 2021, Jonathan came on board by bringing all of the large expertise of Provoke Architect to take part and to formalize the WITO group. So that's myself with Pauline in France, and that's also myself with Jonathan. It is not the same shirt, okay, although it is very colorful shirt. And so it is in our office with Jonathan here. So we do operate in Singapore for different projects in the region and across South Asia, as well as France and Europe. So those are principles, as mentioned just now as well, where we do a lot of research project and we define strategies, collaborative approach towards conservation, and it is where we combine heritage, sustainability, and experiential design, all of that to generate projects and initiatives that are promoting well-being for the people, and where we constantly innovate towards a more resilient world. So our ethos, design with a cause, and you will understand today why we are talking about that, design with a cause. So Before embarking into all of this journey, just to remind a little bit the landscape of Singapore, to understand what is the condition of conservation in the Singapore context. So just to remind that in the 60s, we were 2,300 people per square kilometer. It is now 4 times that amount. So that tells the rapid urbanization and the densification of the nation. 79% of housing are from the public sector, with only 21% from the private sector. In terms of development, land reclamation, plus 24% in more than 50 years. So that's like how much has been reclaimed onto the sea. But at the same time, 46% of green areas. And I hope that my internet is still here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, we can see it, but your sound is up and down.
Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you. Perhaps you can switch, turn off your video.
I have a problem with the connection.
Perhaps the camera, you can turn off the camera. Halo, Mr. Yann.
Oke, kita tunggu
keluar ya.
Menghilang.
Menghilang dia sepertinya.
Ada Bu Tisna.
Ini teman-temannya Mas Punto reunian ini.
Ya Mbak Riri, tadi sore dikabari Mas Punto tuh.
Iya betul.
Ya.
Begitu masuk, wah ada Mas Juni. Masih mute.
Can you turn unmute the mic, please? Jonathan or Yann?
Yeah, very sorry. I don't know why the network is jumping from one another. So I'm very sorry for that. So I will just resume.
Before you start, maybe our suggestion is to turn off the video so that the presentation
It can help. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So very sorry for this. I will turn off the video. Up like this.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
For the presentation.
Okay. So I will go back to this. Okay. Sorry again for this. So
the last slide was about the what is it?
Yeah, you haven't finished the presenting the previous slide.
Previous slide. It was about the density, I think, density.
Okay. So
density before was something and then 80. I don't know.
Next. Yeah, before that.
Land reclamation. Yes, this one.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
All right. So sorry again. So what I was saying is that the land has been basically reclaimed by plus 24%. This is what has been gained onto the sea, which is quite tremendous. And when we look at the land use, 46% is being used for the green areas, with 13% only for the building footprint. The rest are being infrastructure and also like whatever is dedicated to the army. When we look at conserved building, whatever is pre-independence, 7,163 are conserved, while post-independence, only 15. Within the 7,000, it is basically one shop house account for one. That's why there is such a large number of conserved building pre-independence, while 15 for like post-independence. So what is conservation? I'm sure you know about it: preservation, protection, restoration of the natural environment and wildlife. but it is also the preservation and the repair of archaeological, historical, and cultural sites and artifacts. So here I wanted to bring to today the examples of post-independence buildings that have been demolished, just to understand the context. The National Library, built in 1960, demolished in 2004 to give way for a tunnel to ease traffic. 1963, the National Theatre, demolished in 1986 to make way for another expressway. But a plaque has been placed there as a kind of memory. Okay. And even that plaque has been removed to give way to the new MRT station at Fort Canning. But so that is just to give a certain context again. Closer to us, 1977 Rochester Center, an HDB complex demolished in 2018. It was called an iconic housing complex in the center of Singapore to once again give way for expressway. So all of this is just giving a certain context of the preservation in Singapore. So why do we keep demolishing? Because you can ask, why do we keep demolishing? Lack of building maintenance, whether it is on purpose or not, that buildings are not being maintained, that we come to a state of demolition, differing perception on what is conservation worthy. Some people say this is conservation worthy, this is not conservation worthy. And also development economics. The more we demolish, the better it is for the economy, because by demolishing, you rebuild, and therefore it is better for the economy. So, but when we look at that again, that is why preserving. Why do we preserve? And so I will ask the question to my fellow partner here, Jonathan. So why preserving?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to preservation, we look to it more towards some what we call conservation, right? And when we say why do we preserve architecture as a monument? How do we modernize a nation? I think we are also asking ourselves, what is a nation without a nation's building, right? I mean, what is the soul of the city, right? So demolition or preservation, right? I think that is it. Are we going to erase our history, or are we going to preserve our identity, right? Or what we know ourselves as what we were, or do we move on and just keep changing the city? I think that is always the question. So we look at this. We're going to look at some successful examples of conservation. The first one is Dakota Crescent. It's a Singapore Improvement Trust estate built in the 1950s. And this was the very first heritage advocacy project that I embarked on earlier on in my career, when they first announced that they're going to demolish the place. I was quite upset. I went to the area and I realized that there's something that is there's something very spiritual about that place, something very close to my heart about that place, that I thought that I need to do something. So therefore, I started an awareness campaign, right? Because nobody knew what was it about. Everyone just says that, oh, it's just the way that the government works, and it just has to be demolished. So I thought, no, we can't do that, because there's a lot more that we haven't unearthed, and this is where I started off by starting a Facebook page to put stories and old photos of, and to garner some response from it. And it was very good. I mean, further on later, I also talked through a seminar and past residents and people who were interested came as well to share their thoughts and their knowledge about this place. And that became my research data, right, to start with. Later on, somehow the member of parliament as well as the authorities started to know about the groundswell of interest, right, through my Facebook account as well as through the member of parliament as well, and therefore they started a meeting on site, right, to talk more about what we could do for this place. And then we also got interested people who are interested in the social aspect of the space, right? Because you are, but in Singapore, when we kind of like demolish a place, you're also displacing people, right? So this is something that is quite peculiar to Singapore. When we demolish, or rather when we redevelop, we sort of move people away from that area. So this group particularly is very concerned with the elderly who are living there, because predominantly everyone there are either renting all their flats, right? And they're mostly elderly, right, or people of a lower income structure, right? So with that, they started an advocacy campaign by having tours on a weekly basis, to where they brought all residents to talk about the place, talk about their memories, and to bring an awareness of the situation that these residents are going through in trying to move from the old place to the new place, right? And of course, through the tours, you have people who come to talk about, this place kind of like reminds me of the place where I lived when I was younger, like this lady here, and it invokes a kind of memory. And then also, same thing for younger people, like they're saying that they have been living in a certain area for 22 years, and somehow this day sort of reminds it of them, right? And it's important to keep Dakota Crescent. So with all this data, from the social, the social aspect, as well as from the architectural aspect, together with a group of people, we came together and put together a conservation report for the Member of Parliament to table it to in Parliament. And in this proposal, we looked at adaptive reuse, right? You look at the 3 buildings at the left-hand side. We thought, okay, because those are near the MRT station, it has to be somehow be demolished. But that's okay, because what we propose to keep is basically the key types of buildings that are available in the site, as well as the very iconic courtyard surrounding a beautiful playground that is very iconic in Singapore as well, right? As well as the streetscapes and all that. And also one of the key features of this place was that it has to be connected to the river from the main road. So that was what we did. So we took away the ring road that goes through the estate, and we pedestrianized the entire space. And that, and also with the social data that we got, we realized that we wanted to put in some rental flats again for new couples who come in to stay and to experience this new space. On top of that, we thought that we could also have social enterprises to come into the space and also help the residents that have moved away, to give them jobs, to give them opportunities as well, and also some F&B retail to sort of like, make it more updated and more well used throughout the day, right? So these were some proposals that we made to the Parliament, and of course we had a lot of coverage on the news and all that, and that helped the movement a lot. And finally, I think after deliberation in Parliament and after talking to so many people in government, the government decided to actually keep at least 6 of the blocks, which are the 4 types of iconic blocks that were available in the site. So I think we saw this as a first step in the right direction in terms of ground up initiatives in conservation, right? However, are we doing enough to resist this current of demolition and all that, or are we just continuing to erase memory? So from Dakota Crescent, we move on to another project that we did under Docomomo Singapore, all right, where this building was actually endangered and it was very badly maintained, right? But in all aspects, Pearl Bank Apartments is actually a groundbreaking prototype built in the 1970s, right? Where it marries extreme urban intensification and high quality living spaces, right? It is very innovative in terms of its broken cylinder form, right? Elegant proportions, and it also has this interlocking split levels. As you can see over here, this is that broken cylinder where it actually sort of encourages cross ventilation and also views out to the various areas around the city. This is actually in our Chinatown area, right? And then you can see the cross section through a unit, right? You can see the very interesting split levels, which are really innovative at that time. So the architect of this building was actually very involved in trying to save this building, right? And he tried many times to help the residents to do what we call voluntary conservation, right? However, there's a lot of complications due to the dilution of each occupant's property value, and it was an uphill task because it doesn't involve just architecture, it also involves money, finances. Ministry of Finance also had problems with this, and therefore it was quite difficult to get through. And finally, it was sold to a big developer in Singapore, right? So you can see here, you know, the building has been covered with canvas and it's already partially demolished already. So we sort of lost this memory and we lost this history. It's torn down, and now a new building is being built at that area. So why did this happen anyway, right? Because in Singapore, we have this thing called the en bloc fever, right? Where there's this uncertainty in criteria for building lease top up, right? This building actually has 99-year lease, right? And then once it reaches a certain age, the building is just not well maintained, and then the building's value keeps going down, right? And then also there's a negative perception of all these deteriorating modernist structures, and people don't see it worthy of being conserved. So these are kind of like the big issues that we have when it comes to all these huge brutalist, modernist landmarks in Singapore, right? And also legislation also does not encourage these communities to upkeep their buildings properly, right? So it's an uphill battle right from the beginning, right? So as Docomomo, what we did is that we tried to frame what are these issues here, right? There's an underappreciation, lack of awareness of the modernist built heritage. There's this vicious cycle of poor estate management, poor maintenance. Land use laws basically intended for urban regeneration have side effects to encourage all these kind of speculative en bloc agitation, right? And then again, that perception of rehabilitation or effective reuse of high rise is just not well tested yet. Okay. So what do? We approach this project in a positive light, right? We say rehabilitation equals to revaluation equals to rejuvenation. So we try to convince the government with a new socio-economic value, right? Well, this building is actually within a Chinatown, which has an aging population living around it, and there's also a hospital near it. So these kind of like presented opportunities, right, to address pressing issues faced by Singapore, and then we use Pearl Bank as one way to counter that, right? There's also millennials getting priced out of property ladder. There's a lack of affordable rents, right? So what we propose here is possible new users, new mixers. We can sort of like change, which help change the minds and the mindset of the developer as well as the government, right? So we look into integrated assisted living, co-living for millennials, right? Creative havens for SMEs, co-working spaces, and also maybe a mix of luxury apartments, right? So assisted living, well, we had a partner who came in to help us study it, right? Because of its proximity to the hospital, so on and so forth. We also looked at positive examples around the world. In this case, particularly, is at the UK, Centrepoint London, Murray in Hong Kong, which is quite iconic right now. And of course, on top of that, we sort of try to convince them that, you know, Pearl Bank Apartments also sits within a wider network of interesting places, right? And it is a place-making catalyst where it can become a transit-oriented development because it's near the MRT, it's near the subway, right? It could activate the Pulse Hill, which is the hill that it's sitting on, right? It is also a gateway to Chinatown, right? And its close proximity to the medical hub gives it a lot of potential to be something, right? And we also said that, you know, but in order to do this, there are possible planning incentives, bonus GFA, rezoning, plot ratio transfers, you know, co-develop adjacent white sites. White sites are basically sites that are not zoned for any use, but it's subject to approval, right? And can we have some private-public collaboration, right, to encourage this kind of like a new kind of like urban design. We also played with this recurring theme that, you know, tabula rasa development is really a sustainability issue. One person actually said that the demolishing a building is equal to actually burning down a whole forest, right? So we use that as a kind of like a rhetoric to sort of convince, you know, the government, because sustainability issues were the issue of the day when we were fighting this. So that was one of our main bullets as well to convince the government. And then in this, again, we tried to say, okay, if you know, we can't conserve the whole building, what if we conserve part of it, which as in the important part of it, right, which is the broken cylinder. But then of course because the developer actually wanted to look at dollars and cents, and they said that, you know, the units are too big, it's very hard to break it down to smaller units. So what we did is that, because one bedroom units actually are the money making tool for them most of the time. So what we did is that we proposed, okay, we keep the cylinder, but part of it we take it out, and then we inserted a new bookend kind of like a unit that houses all the one-story unit, all the one-bedroom units, I mean, right? And then we have a new podium that sort of like hugs the partially new tower, right? So that became our, I mean, we worked with an engineer, and we worked with a Japanese construction company as well to look at this feasibility study. However, I think the developer had cold feet because the numbers just didn't stack for them, and it was too late because they bought the building already and it was slated to be for residential. So to change its use and to change its total and to change the total construction and all that was just too much for them. Therefore, they had no choice but to still demolish it and rebuild it. Right, so that's the very sad case of it. You see that little building there, now it's reduced to just a few stories high, right? And now I think it's totally gone, right? So sad case for this building. And then we have this other this other building called Golden Mile Complex, right? Also built in the 1970s. Pearl Bank, sorry, was built in the 1970s as well. Golden Mile Complex built in the 1970s by TP Architects. Innovative in its way because it's the first time we had a sloping building like that, and at the same time it also embodied a certain kind of like an urban idea, right? The metabolist idea of, you know, having buildings connected in an entire city made out of these connections and city rooms and so on and so forth. So Singapore was actually the first one to build this Japanese idea. And Japanese came to Singapore and they saw it and they said, wow, Singapore, wow, you actually built our ideas. We haven't had the chance to build that yet. So this was really an eye-opener at that time, right? And for this building, I think what happened was that because there was so much attention to it, and because the government said that they did not want to lose another important building like the Pearl Bank Apartments, we have a success story here. This building actually rode on the backbone of the unsuccessful story of Pearl Bank Apartment, and it was eventually saved. Right, so you can see the beautiful terraces, the back terraces of the roof in this picture. And then you can see in this building also, it actually houses Thai community, right? Because back in those days, this place was where people go to Thailand by taking buses, and then slowly the Thai businesses started to grow because of that, right? But the sad thing is, in Singapore, when we conserve a building, the entire community there gets displaced as well. So this is something that we also have to ask. When we conserve, what are we conserving? Are we just conserving buildings, or should we conserve the community as well? Right. So now we've looked at all these lessons that we have about conservation and adaptive reuse. I mean, for Golden Mile Complex right now, since it's been saved, there are incentives to try to keep the building, but at the same time intensify the GFA of the building, right? Which we have not shown here because these are things that are quite highly classified at the moment, right? But what we're going to show you now is some of two examples where we have sort of looked into designing a building with adaptive reuse in mind, right? So in this building, the client actually came to us with the idea of conserving this existing building and trying to update it to something that is to a co-living space, right? So the whole idea here was to actually revitalize and rejuvenate it into something that's more livable and yet at the same time more sustainable, and also introduce more greenery into the space, right? So this is what we call a industrial P1 building with an open plan, right? And basically broken into two wings, right? And basically the structural system here is all about posts and beams, and it's a very simple structural system. So the proposal in the left is something that another architect did for the client, and I think the client said that, came to us and said, hey, do you think you can do something better? Because in terms of livability, I think having an internal corridor like what you see in the plan on the left, it's not so conducive, right, for livability. So on the right, is our new proposal, where we sort of like rejig the entire configuration. And what we did is that we tried to insert courtyards within the building, right? We still kept the external structure, but we inserted new courtyards in the center to create new common spaces that face it, and also encourage cross ventilation through the building. So with that, we optimized the layout configuration, and we're able to actually still meet the same numbers as what the previous architects did, except that we now introduce a new courtyards within it. And what happens is an amazing space that sort of like encourages cross ventilation and cooling and passive cooling without introducing too much mechanical services. So on top of that, we also introduced a kind of a new screen, right, to sort of like dress up the facade of the building, and at the same time introduce vertical planting that sort of helps cool the facade as well, right? And so this kind of like sets the tone for this new design. And the internal, what happens is that the internal corridors also are introduced with more light as well, as opposed to previously, and also the windows along the corridors are all louver windows, so they allow for cross ventilation even through the rooms as well, right? So this is just one of the courtyards that was designed, right, for that also incorporates the common space, like where we are standing right now, looking out into the courtyard. And then of course the interior spaces were kept as minimal as possible, but still encouraging as much sunlight into the space. Okay, so at this time, I'll pass over to Yann, who will introduce you the other projects that we're currently embarking.
Thank you, Jonathan, for this really fascinating presentation in all of the journey towards adaptive reuse in Singapore, and that gives the context. And you mentioned something that is quite important, which is about community making, and how communities are relating to buildings, to the built environment, and how we can pass this on from one generation to another. So here for this project that is under development at the moment, that the construction will start very soon, Good Food, Good Life. So it's a project, it was an international competition that we won with Jonathan and our team. And so it is this idea of like bringing the design with an empathy for nature, and to make the entire project revolving around the idea of food. And so how that can contribute to a better life. So this is the existing building, which is a former fire station. That was built in the 50s. It is in Bukit Tema, which is just like facing the nature reserve. So it's a very particular context. We are not in a city center. It is not like hyper, super powerful kind of development. It is closer to the nature, surrounded by residential areas. And so as you can see here, you have the fire station that is gazetted, so which means extremely important conservation on it, and the different barracks blocks where the firemen used to live. So that's an overview of the project that we are working on at the moment. As you can see, it is very much immersed in nature, with nature, for nature. As I was explaining, it is facing the Bukit Tema Nature Reserve that brings a whole set of complexity towards conservation, because it's an extremely humid environment where basically the buildings are in, like, I wouldn't say danger, they're not in danger, but there is a lot of pressure from the humid environment to the construction. So here, the vision of this project was to bring together different parts towards personal well-being, fresh food, community engagement, education, element as well, connection to nature and active lifestyle, to connect all of these different components together around this adaptive reuse project. We were also driven at that time when we were working on it. It was 2 years ago, just at the beginning of COVID, where also Singapore was embarking in this idea of food security, to hopefully produce 30% of the food locally by 2030. So that has inspired us a lot with Jonathan on what is the kind of program that we want to put there, to make sure that we can bring again the communities together. So the concept and the themes, it is also towards circularity. When you do adaptive reuse, it is definitely circularity that is being employed. So recycle, redesign, produce, distribute, use, reuse and repair, and so on. So adaptive reuse is the symbol of circularity, circular economy. And when we look at this circular economy, we looked at how we can produce good food from a fertile soil, then seeding and growth and harvesting, cooking, consumption, waste management, organic fertilizer. So here it is not only the food that we are addressing, but it is the culture and how that is totally embedded into the local context and into the daily life of the people, according to those 4 moments: initiate, transform, share, and recover. Those moments are what has been driving the whole project as well, towards, again, this virtuous food cycle to be the gateway towards the nature, because we are along the green corridor. The green corridor, it is this green spine that is crossing Singapore, that used to be the railway going to Malaysia, and that has been now converted into a green spine. So we are along that green spine, and along which we will welcome the communities once again. So you can see that not only we have this green spine that is crossing Singapore, but we are also creating our own green spine that we call the community trail, around these ideas of initiate, transform, share, and recover. And all of that is the story that we are telling as well towards conservation of the buildings and how we can engage the communities in that process. So you can see that along that community trail at a glance, you can see from your left side the gazetted building, which means like super conserved, and then you have the barrack blocks that are conserved but not gazetted, so we have a bit more flexibility here. So we have a fantastic group on board, Studio Lapis. So they're conservation specialists, and so they've been doing tremendous work in unearthing the history of Bukit Timah fire station and the context of where it is sitting and why it was built. Why that? Because since it is a gazetted building, we need to restore it to its original conditions. It's been modified multiple times, repainted. You have plants that have grown on it. So there is quite a lot of care that needs to be applied onto the fire station. And Studio Lapis, again, is leading on that. And Jonathan, together with Studio Lapis, are also guiding in this conservation. So in this, we would like to give back to the communities and to make sure that any kind of heritage effort that is being done, let's not forget that this is a private development, it's not a public development, so it is private funding. And so this is the idea of giving back to the society, giving back to the communities, and to have some historical markers all along the compound to give this sense of history, this sense of grounding. And so the early days of Bukit Timah, Upper Bukit Timah, so the farms that used to be there, the quarries that used to be there as well. So that's quite fascinating to see this kind of strong environment, this natural environment that somehow is still happening with the nature reserve. And then the community, secret societies, tragedies and fire and so on, like that was happening in the different villages and the different markets around. And then came the age of industrialization, where big industries have been placed there, and even a station that was nearby, because also we had that railway that was connecting to Malaysia, and then fire risk, factories, fire risk, therefore you built a fire station. So that's how the fire station was built and the reason why it was built, and we can see on these pictures how lively it was. So it was an essential fire station close to the heart of the people, and so it's been ongoing. And then it was, and then after it was stopped to become something different because another fire station has been built nearby, and then it became a place that it was a restaurant and a kindergarten and like not really coherent kind of development, but it was somehow reused, but very much damaged by the different users. So we want to engage once again the user by sharing moments of history and to have a strong sense of belonging. And because it is by doing that that we can really ground the different communities. So promoting the heritage significance of the fire station, this is one of the main elements of this project. But beyond that, we would like to have this approach to nature, because heritage is not only building, it is also natural heritage. So that's very important to marry the built environment with the natural environment, because nature heritage is also connecting us to the past towards the future, with all of this idea of landscape and foodscape. So designing again with empathy for nature, with nature for nature. And so we do that in curating all of our programming inside all of the different tenants, the different partners, around this idea of mother nature, food, body and mind, and education, that we are constructing, inviting the communities to strengthen. Yeah. I can hear someone speaking. Okay. So to create this holistic approach towards the different tenants and the different activities to bring a new life to this entire compound, a new lifestyle as well for this compound that is very much in our century. So creating a sustainable community, when we say sustainable community, is a community that will take ownership and that will stay there and that will care for the building and the environment. Sustainability towards the planet, yes, but sustainability towards the people, it's even stronger. Collaborating together, having multiple stakeholders in bringing this project to life and embarking into an all year long engagement with weekly activities, monthly activities to bring life to the project. The last part in this presentation is that, of course, you can immerse yourself in this kind of like farm-to-table experience and so on, but this wouldn't be even stronger without these challenges. Basically, reinventing cities, it is part of this global network of resilient cities, the C40, and so we are addressing, tackling the 10 challenges of this international network of resilient cities, and so we are applying that in this adaptive reuse of gazetted building and conserved building in a natural environment with the communities towards the future. So there's a lot of different challenges there, but energy efficiency, low carbon energy, because we want to demonstrate that adaptive reuse can contribute to decarbonizing our built environment. Life cycle assessment, sustainable materials management. So that's what we are doing as well with sourcing for sustainable and green materials, restoring existing building. This is an act of sustainability. That is extremely important. Jonathan reminded that in his presentation as well, that conserving a building is like conserving a forest. Low carbon mobility to connect to the rest of Singapore. Climate resilience in being like advocating behavioral changes towards climate fight and to fight against climate change, sorry. So that's also very important. The green mark strategies, which is our local regulation to make sure that our building is green. Ecological services for the neighborhood and green jobs. It is also how this building will be totally embedded into its neighborhood to work with the people nearby. Sustainable water management as well towards all of this lush landscape and even the utilization by the end users. Waste management, we are doing a closed loop, recycling on site and so on. Biodiversity, urban vegetation, urban agriculture, we're having permaculture farm on our site to reconnect with the nature, flora and fauna. Inclusive action, social benefits, community engagement. Once you win the people, your project is a success. So that's what we are doing. And of course, innovative architecture and urban design in this preservation. So with here, I will just conclude on this entire presentation that activities will be planned and so on, but this entire initiative that we are doing for Bukit Timah Fire Station is the result of years of exploration, intense fight as well from Jonathan's side to preserve buildings that are at threat, being like basically a champion towards heritage conservation, like Singapore Heritage Society, Docomomo, and on my end being part of also the international network of the ICOM, and so on. So it is natural that we come together to bring this kind of project to life and to demonstrate to the rest of the communities that we can do it together, and our history is extremely important as long as we preserve it together. So thanks again for listening to our presentation. I hope that this can sparkle like discussions and questions. So thanks again, Punto, the Trisakti University, for having us tonight. I know it's a bit late already, so thanks again for having us. And I hope that we can have a very good discussion. I will put back I will stop share, and I will put back our video. So thanks again so much, and yeah, like feel free to ask many questions.
Thank you for all of the presenters. Thank you for the excellent presentation. From here, we learned a lot how conservation projects can simultaneously improve the environment, sustainability, and improve various aspects. Okay, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, now question and answers session. First, to question, please raise hand and don't forget to mention your name before giving opinion or question and answer. Please.
Mbak Alika.
Oke, Mbak Alika, silahkan.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting, and I am very interested in Singapore architecture, and I hope to visit Singapore soon. So, what I really want to ask, what I really want to know is, how do you understand the essence of the place so that you won't lose its identity when you conserve? So that is my question. Thank you.
It's a big question. So thank you very much for asking. Yeah, the act of, like, Jonathan gave an example on the Golden Mile complex where it's been conserved. So after like various discussions and demonstrations and so on, like the benefit of preservation is being conserved. But the risk now is that for this conservation, basically all of the communities that are inside will be removed. And it's a very major question. What is the purpose of conserving if in the end you remove what makes the connection, which is the people? In that journey, it's a journey that takes long. So I would say that at this point of time in Singapore, it is step by step, and at least the first step is to conserve this kind of building, and then maybe the next step will be, okay, we know how to conserve, we see the value, and now the value, it is basically the social capital, which is the people. And that is, it is something that even for other contexts, other buildings, especially for HDB, which is like very large number of housing in Singapore, they can be demolished from one day to another and to rebuild. And the whole, most of the comment is when you do that, and that's also what Jonathan was looking at in Dakota, is that you displace people and therefore you break the communities, and especially for elderly that are very much troubled and overwhelmed by that because all of their social network is broken. So there are groups and ground-up initiatives on that to try to demonstrate we need to keep the people within the context. So I don't have a direct answer to that because it is in the process, it is in the making, it is rising, definitely, because these are conversations that are happening like through different groups to demonstrate that you cannot displace communities. You need to keep them on site because it is by keeping that social network that there is a strong sense of belonging, and therefore the more you belong, the more you care. And it is how you lay basically a cultural context.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Yann has said, on top of the social aspect of conservation, I think the architectural aspect has a few criteria, right? When you look at all the projects that we, or rather the advocacy projects that we presented just now, Dakota Crescent, Pearl Bank Apartments, Golden Mile Complex, all these, they basically have some issue of national identity, right? Because these buildings were built at the time, or rather Golden Mile Complex and Pearl Bank Apartments, they were built at the time when Singapore was first developing its city, and there was a lot of opportunities given to local architects, as opposed to now where a lot of foreign architects are coming to Singapore, and then somehow the local identity is a little bit diluted, right? But these buildings were built in the 1970s, and local architects, Singaporean architects, Malaysian architects actually were building with a lot of energy and a lot of ideas. So is it important to keep? I think it's important because it's part of our heritage, right? It's part of what we are as a nation, right? And then for Dakota Crescent, there is this thing about social memories, right? You have national identity and then you have social memories. So I think it's two different criteria that I think both must be looked at seriously before we consider whether to demolish a building or not.
Thank you for your answer. It's actually a really good answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Nurlalika. Next, Pak Boy Birawa, please.
Yeah, first, thank you for the presentation. It's interesting. Yeah, maybe we feel more because we have a lot of cultural or colonial left in our time. I want to ask about then in the condition that you face, how first is how the process of conservation project in Singapore, how to make it confirmation for the project is regarding the significant value that you think that's the value of significant, because the significant value is a very subjective. If we think that is important value, then maybe the others say it's not, because in the other ways we believe that in the time that we want to freeze the progress of evolution, we want to freeze it. We want to keep it stay in the time that is like in the time before. And in other ways, we have to give away for what we call it survival of the fittest. But I mean, to survive, sometimes you have to evolve, to do the evolution to survive. How you think about it? I mean, how to choose the building that you think that have a strong, very significant value. Thank you. I think this is my question.
It's also a very difficult question, right?
Maybe let me start off like how do we do conservation in Singapore? It's very interesting, because whatever that we've been talking about just now basically was a lot of top down and some bottom up, right? In the case of Dakota Crescent, say for example, there was bottom up pressure to conserve, right? Initially, what I understand in the background, right, I would hear say is that they only wanted to keep one building, right, as a token of appreciation that, oh, okay, we're going to demolish, and then, okay, I'll just keep one building just to make people happy. But however, didn't make, I think, luckily that news didn't go out, but there was a groundswell of interest, and people were asking, right, what are you going to do, right? And there's a little bit of politics inside also, because at that time, there was the general elections that's happening, right? And then people were asking the member of parliament, hey, what are you going to do with that building, right? So that became a kind of like an opportunity for us to do something, for the ground to do something. And then the top sort of reacted and said, okay, let's look at it, and we use this as as an example to prove that, okay, we are listening to the people, and therefore we try to see what we can do about it, right? So that was one way that of conservation, bottom up and then top down reaction, right? Now the other way was really approaching it through doing a collaborative approach. Okay, after all these incidences where a lot of buildings are demolished, without telling people, the government started to wake up, right, and started to say, hey, I think we need to change our stance in conservation, and therefore we have to work with the people. So what the government is doing now is that they are working with organizations like us, the Komomo Singapore, Heritage Society, architectural firms like us, and even big firms that have done work like that, right? To try and have like a roundtable discussion to say, hey, what are your concerns and all that. So then after that, take it back, they discuss, then after that, they make a decision from there, right? So that's another way of doing conservation in Singapore. Now the background of this whole story is that we're only talking about buildings. There's no people involved in it. Yeah. There's no social fabric involved in it. And this is the problem in Singapore, right? Like what Yann has said it so clearly just now is that we always displace communities. We always lose the existing fabric. And then there's this other wave of conservation. We call it tactical urbanism, right? Where existing building is there, you don't do too much to the building, you just push it up a bit, and then you tactically occupy the building. So that's what happens to one of the buildings called Golden Mile Tower, where a cinema sort of took over an indie cinema sort of took over the building and really made it hip, right? I think you see in Rex KL also in Malaysia, all right, where you see this kind of very light touches to an existing building. Now, what is good about that is that it does not make the building more expensive in terms of rental, because you're still keeping the existing building like that. But at the same time, you're giving it a different life, right? So I think in Singapore we have this very diverse way of conserving buildings, and I think it's quite interesting.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Masih mute, Bu Lucy.
Sorry. Thank you, Pak Boy Birama, and then
Pak Anto.
Sudaryanto, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Hello, good night. Thank you for. I would like to ask, since, as you mentioned before, that the government and also private are engaging in this adaptive reuse, conservation, and development. I would like to know what is the main consideration for them, the private, I mean, when they would like to take the opportunity to engage the project.
Oh. Another tough question.
Yeah, you have only tough questions. Okay.
Be honest, because I work in the developer, a real estate developer. So, like in Jakarta, there are many opportunity to make this kind of development, reuse, adaptive reuse, conservation. But then, again and again, what happens is it becomes like F&Bs, and then this kind of leisure activities. And maybe sometimes it's not the real needs of the area. I ask because let's say if the needs in the location is housing, but the building typology is not fit to it, then what happened? Will they take it and do big renovation, which might reduce their profit, or just try to look for other locations? Yeah.
In these, in what Jonathan explained just now, So you have the top-down approach and you have the bottom-up approach.
Yeah.
But you have something else that is in between.
Yeah.
That is the private sector.
Yeah.
The private sector with developers.
Yeah.
And so they are the ones that are playing a lot with all of the different contexts to acquire buildings in a certain way, whether it is en bloc or not, and then to start to do things on them. When we are working on this Bukit Timah fire station with the developers, so it's a private sector, and it takes a lot of risk and a lot of energy from the developers to embark on that. Because this adaptive reuse, they used to be barracks and we're transforming them into something radically different. It used to be a fire station and we're transforming it into something radically different. And this conservation is not only at the building, it is also at the compound level. So it is not just basically building. So you need to deal with what do you do outside, how do you connect, you need to have a road. So all of this, it's a lot of vision from the developers to embark on that, and knowing that the response of the different authorities when you do this, you know that it's going to be complex. It's going to be very, very complex. As much innovative ideas you want to bring, ultimately you need to submit to the authorities and the authorities should approve. So the journey is longer. You just need to be driven by your vision and to make sure that you believe in that and that you are doing good. And when I say doing good, it is that if you go back to just the idea of profit and prosper without integrating the planet and the people, then where is the meaning? What's the point of doing all of that? And adaptive reuse, private sector will say, but I cannot make profit out of it. Unless you find the right combination that is mixing planet, people, and prosper. And once you have this role model, then you can deploy that on other projects. And that's the reason why we've been contacted to do this project for this IRE, transforming an industrial building into student housing. You see that it's totally different. Even as we all know, industrial buildings such as offices, the grid is different than the grid of housing. But it just takes the right combination to demonstrate that, yes, we can do it. Yes, it can bring value toward profit, because we need to have this profit to be able to move on and to do more and more projects. So that's here again, my response to your question, it is to convince the private sector to embark on that. It is to demonstrate the values when you combine people, planet, and prosper. I prefer using the term prosper more than profit. Prosper because basically it has a financial value, but it has also social values and sustainable values. When we prosper, then we promote this idea of well-being among the end users and even our dear developers that will be very happy to sell more. But if it is for the better and for the improvement of the daily life of the people, then yes, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. In Singapore, is there any like a bonus for the developer if they want to embark in this kind of project? I mean, let's say they cannot have a profit for this adaptive reuse, but they have other
incentive
from the government as an incentive as an exchange.
Yes. Well, depends for what.
I think for large scale, I think Bukit Timah fire station is a little bit different because the lease is only 9 years. It's a 3+3+3, so it's a very short lease, and actually the building is owned by the government. So there's a competition, and there was a competition that sort of like encourages some development. for larger scale projects like Golden Mile Complex, where it involves like a huge ground floor area, there is incentives in order to allow the developers to make to maximize the GFA, right? But at the same time, also they also gave incentives, or rather they gave additional GFA for them to build within the existing building, right? To a certain extent, right? So it does not disadvantage them when they. But it's controlled. It's controlled because the government also has to assess and see whether the additions in the existing building make sense to the original building. So yeah, so it depends.
Okay, I think that's good. So there is incentive, and maybe if Pak Santo can also introduce that to the government in Indonesia. Okay, thank you.
Case by case, you know.
Yeah, case by case.
Golden Mile Complex is what we call a sandbox. You know, once in a lifetime thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Anto. Next, Pak Santo.
Yes, thank you, moderator. Good evening, gentlemen, Jonathan and Yann. It is a very excellent sharing of experience and knowledge this evening. Like Anto just question about some issue. Jakarta soon, will be the capital of Indonesia will be moved to Kalimantan. Then the authority, the central government, will leave a lot of building, government building, to be converted into commercial. Because most of the government officer will be moved to new capital. It's a little bit what you call it. We need more. We need to learn more from what you have done in Singapore, actually, because it's very interesting that your presentation about adaptive use on the high-rise building, from the old heritage 1970s era into put it all the idea, fresh idea for the 2020 needs of the community. In the initial step of the conservation, which party is the most difficult to convince? My understanding is every development has three stakeholders. One is the landowner. Second is the end user, and the third is the authority, is the government. From your experience in the past, which one is the most difficult to convince? Of course, this depends on the function of the building. Maybe you can share the hardest one, because we're gonna have the same situation soon. If the capital soon move to Kalimantan. Thank you.
Pak Santo, actually, I would like to ask that, but I know that this is your line, so
no,
it's yours.
I'm not understanding the government. All right, thank you.
I think maybe I speak on behalf. Okay, from my experience, I think all parties are equally difficult.
Yes. That's the reality.
All parties are equally difficult. Okay, I tell you why. Because in Singapore, basically the government is a populist government. Okay, what I mean by populist government means that, you know, it tries to make everyone happy, right, in order to win votes, right, for them to run the country, right? So they are like that, right? And therefore, what happens is that if the rest, okay, now let's look at private buildings, because private buildings actually, they are the most difficult ones to actually conserve, because it's already owned by somebody, and they already done their maths, and they say that, hey, you know, actually, to be honest, I tear down the building, I rebuild, I earn much more, right? It's actually a fact in Singapore, right? Because there's not enough incentive in Singapore to conserve a building, right? So that's why I say Golden Mile Complex is a sandbox, because never in history has Singapore given so much incentive for that one building. Okay, so it is quite a special case. But for any other private development in Singapore, it is a big battle, because the gap between redevelopment and conservation, that amount of money is a lot. Who's going to pay for that? Right?
Yes, exactly.
Developers not going to pay for it. The private owners going to pay for it. Government's not going to pay for it. Then who? Right? So there are instances, I think, where government. So that's why I think in Golden Mile Complex, I think there is by giving all these incentives, additional incentives, that gap becomes smaller, right? But it's not. It doesn't negate. It doesn't negate that gap, right, to zero, right? So I think this is the case for everywhere, right? So I think then the next thing is that how important is that building to the country? How important is it to keep that building, right? So in the cases that I presented, they are important buildings, right? In Singapore, and they have, like, Golden Mile Complex, however, has larger support because it is also a public space, because there's a retail podium at the bottom. Our minister actually had our national development minister actually had experience being in the shop with his mother in this complex before. His mother actually used to own a shop in that space, so he also has some memories of the space. So somehow, you know, you gotta have that kind of luck, right? Before these kind of things happen, right? But anyway, not only him, but there are many people who, because it is a public building, right? I mean, notwithstanding the minister's experience that space, but there are also a lot of other people who are prominent who have experienced that space before. So in that case, that social memory of that building is quite big. And on top of that, there's major support from the architectural fraternity as well.
And not only that, it is to start somewhere. It cannot be only top-down kind of approach or bottom-up kind of approach. It is also international institution, to raise awareness, like the Komomo, for example, that is a tool to raise awareness on conservation toward modern history. And so it is something we cannot wait for the government to take action. We cannot necessarily wait for the people to realize that perhaps history and memories are more important than profit. And then to have this like understanding that conserving is valuable towards the built environment. So it takes multiple layers, and that can all come together to be able to make things moving forward. So if you're asking this question to see that what can be done in a Jakarta context, it might not be only from a top-down approach, but also from various institutions, perhaps Docomomo Indonesia that might come into place, and other initiatives from institutions, middle ground, to demonstrate the value of such pieces of architecture.
So I think at the end of the day, I think if you really want to conserve that building, there's a lot of work that has to be done. right? On the ground, you need to raise that awareness, right? You need to spread the news, right? And you have to make everyone love the building, not only the architects. You have to make the man in the street, right? The young people, make them go and like take Instagram, like, or take TikTok of that place, make it more popular, and the more popular that building is, the less the reason there is also to take down the building. Yeah, so that's the other aspect that you also need to tackle.
Problem. I don't have TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But it's a big challenge for Jakarta.
Yeah.
Because the political will now, as the central government really push and push. First with the armed force and the police will be removed first to the new capital. So it will be some buildings will be, I'm not saying empty, but will be abandoned. Yeah. And again, most of the government buildings are in the prime location, and it's already it's already on the heritage level. Yeah. So yeah, we have to. Is there any government officer here? We must learn. We must adapt the what you have done quickly, because otherwise, when it happened, then we're not ready. Definitely. And it's not the best idea is to have a to have a mindset, the same mindset, same understanding, and then one regulation that to regulate all the how we can do the adaptive reuse, yeah, what can be done and what cannot, something like that. All the regulation must be prepared first before the time is coming. Yeah. And I'm sorry to say, it's Indonesian, it's a little bit slow, right, compared with the Singaporean. Yeah, because yeah, we are big. Yeah, of course, big, some little bit slow, something like that. Yeah. But it's very interesting. Yeah, we have to learn more from you guys. Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Santo. Yeah. Because time is limited. Next question only for Mbak Retna and Mas Angga. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Jonathan and Yann, it was a nice presentation of the examples that you have done. And what interests me is about the first project. I think it relates to memory, right? Memory of the occupants. So my question is, how did you manage to collaborate different memories? Because on the video, say 20 years living there and some 60 years living there, certainly memories are different, right? So how did you manage to combine, and what is the main concern in making decision for that conclusion? Okay, that's my question.
I think you're talking about the Kota Crescent, right? So what happened was that after I set up the Facebook page to rally some support and also spread awareness of the place, people started writing to me through the Facebook messages, right? And one of them is actually a social activist, right? Because he was actually quite interested in trying to help the elderly, right, over there. But at the same time, I think he realized also he has another task at hand, right, which is to actually document, right, the social memories the history of its people, of the people that used to live there. Right. So what he did was when he messaged me, I had the first meeting with him. We connected very well, and then what actually he wanted is that he wanted to conduct tours, right, to raise awareness of the plight of the people or the people that were moving out. But at the same time, he used the tours to sort of document, you know, what the people say, right? So we had about 2,000 people who actually already attended the tours, right? And that alone already became a kind of like a petition, right? To say that, hey, so many have already come, so many have already, the fact that they come means that they're kind of supportive, right, of this conservation, right? And also we do photo documentaries. He did also video documentaries, documentation and all that, and that helped us galvanize our position. Okay, and we put all this documentation into that conservation report, right, to tell our member of parliament as well as the government that, hey, we not only think that these buildings are important nationally, but socially, you have all these stories, right, of people coming in saying that, hey, you know, they feel that this place reminds them of how Singapore was 10, 20 years ago, things like that. So yeah, so I think that was how we sort of like collated all these data information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Retno. The last question from Pak Angga, Mas Angga.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. It was very interesting, and not just only the presentation about the adaptive reuse, but also your answer, Jonathan and Yann. But the most I want to know is the success rate, okay, from your previous project or recent project, from the community point of view and your point of view, that those projects achieve the community hope or something like that. Maybe you can just say it from your point of view. Thank you.
Success rate. Yeah. I would say okay, I will try to recontextualize a little bit to be able to answer, and I will answer in two different parts. I was personally very much affected when Pearl Bank couldn't be saved. I used to live there when I moved to Singapore more than 13 years ago. That was my first home. So I was having a very strong emotional link with this building. And so every time when I was seeing it being attacked and on the verge of being demolished, all of the feedback that I was getting was like, oh, you are too emotional because you are connected to this building. So therefore you cannot see that it will be much more valuable to demolish it simply because you have an emotional link. And when even from the authorities, the response that I was getting was, well, maybe we need to demolish this one to be able to save some others, which was for me very heartbreaking to hear. I was like, well, like, no, we shall not do that. Like, you cannot kill something to save something else. This is the wrong thinking. But a few years later, it did help to save Golden Mile. So Golden Mile, so just again to recontextualize, you have the 4 iconic modern buildings in Singapore, being Pearl Bank, People's Park that is just opposite our office, and Golden Mile Complex and Golden Mile Tower. Pearl Bank couldn't be saved. People's Park, big question mark. Golden Mile Complex has been saved, and Golden Mile Tower, well, due to that kind of ground-up initiative, it might be preserved. So if I look at it from an architectural standpoint, I would say Golden Mile would be the biggest success in terms of conservation, but with the risk, the very big risk that the communities will be broken because they will no longer be there. On the contrary, and at the same time, we are working on this other project in this Bukit Timah fire station that is a very unique kind of context with a very unique project where the biggest, the most important element in this project is the people. And without them, we will not be able to demonstrate the success of such project. Like, we can do the best conservation exercise to keep this gazetted building or even to transform this conserved building, but if it is without the people, then it's not going to be a success. So maybe we can discuss again in a year from now to see if our success rate will be good. Again, I think the best reward in whatever you do in architecture and conservation, it is if you win basically the people, and that would be the biggest success rate for us.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Very nice.
Okay, thank you for the interesting discussion. Finally, we are come to the last session. We would like to say thanks again for the presenters and all of the audience for active participation. The conclusion of the presentation today, the restoration process using the adaptive reuse method. I think it is a very flexible method in meeting various demands of today's need, especially for Indonesia, which has a lot of buildings that need to be renovated, but costs are high. Of course, the adaptive reuse strategy will be widely applied in various heritage locations in Indonesia. Hopefully, many architects will be able to follow the steps like for Mr. Yann Follain and Mr. Jonathan Poh, who have a very ideal thoughts and foresights, I think. Hopefully, the presentation will give benefit for us. Thank you for your attention, and I return the seminar for MC Bu Ratna. Thank you.
Terima kasih Ibu Lucy. Mungkin sebelum kita masuk ke bagian terakhir yaitu kata penutup oleh Pak Punto, alangkah baiknya mungkin kita buka kamera dulu untuk foto bersama. Please open camera for photo session. Pak Punto, can you help us please?
Oke deh. Tuh absen. Siap. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Terima kasih.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Punto sudah dibantu. Oh, masih ada bunyi lagi. Oke, baik kalau begitu tadi terima kasih sudah foto bersama. Selanjutnya untuk penutup kami persilakan kepada Pak Punto. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Retno ya. So thank you very much for Mas Yann dan Mas Jonathan ya, for very wonderful presentations ya. And also it was very great that after that we had a very fruitful discussion ya. 2 hours is not enough ya, so please students or participants, let's go to Singapore ya. It's better for having discussion on site ya Pak Arya ya.
Case study.
And Jonathan, you see there are our very professional architect in conservation ya, like Mas Boy, Pak Arya.
Pak Arya biasa.
They are very stable. We respect him very much and he joins this.
Oh no, please. I'm just saying what I've been doing, right? But there are a lot more expert out there. You come to Singapore, I can introduce you guys to them. I think that you should hear from them as well.
Yeah.
Any contact that we can contact to?
Yes,
your
I think
contact?
we can send you our email, right?
Okay.
then you can contact us from there.
Thank you in advance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully there will be a synergy, Jonathan and Yann. Another talk or discussion or perhaps a project sama-sama.
Yeah, sharing.
Yeah. So I give respect to also for students for your positive participations, question and answer and discussions. So I hope that you have learned something from this guest lecture that will help you to finish the assignment for the class of Ibu Lucia, and hope that you also understand. I think the situation is different, Singapore, Indonesia.
Great.
But I'm sure we can learn something, And interestingly, the context of value, is different. Whatever you try very hard to ask, what is the value, to Yann and Jonathan, they always have a answer for that, It's not about the value or it's not about the building, but it's about how to involve community, I think. So there is no formula for that, You have to realize that, Don't see the text when you can do the formulation, if this and then that, It's not like that, You have to go to the field, You have to ask the community. I think that's the formula, And I think I want to quote what I don't remember whether Yann or Jonathan say. You have to make people love the buildings. Also, very interesting because we study architecture, but we don't learn how to make people love the building,
TikTok. Don't forget the TikTok.
That's why I want to encourage everyone to learn TikTok, learn Instagram, connect with the youth, because they are the next generation that will use your building. So,
Jonathan and Yann, Pak Arya always said that heritage business is like we love
others friends' wife.
Other friends' wife more than our wife. Jadi kita lebih ngurusi istri orang lain,
Even the owner doesn't love it, we love it.
Okay, I think that's all, Bu Lucia. Thank you once again, Jonathan and Yann. So very sangat membuka, sangat insightful, Dan ini I think this is also like remind us that it's time to go to Singapore, Let's travel again.
Yes.
Great.
Come to Singapore, Thank you, Mbak Retno.
Thanks again, everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Station,
Terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Tiket Singapura lagi mahal-mahal nih sekarang.
Aneh.
12 juta bolak-balik. Gila bener.
Lewat Tanjung Pinang
naik kapal dari Batam.
Ferry.
Dari
Nggak tahu tuh gimana ceritanya jadi
Absennya
mahal.
nggak bisa ya Bapak Ibu ya? Kenapa ya?
Dibuka.
Keblok Bu, keblok.
Udah pakai foto aja Bu, pakai foto aja Bu.
Ya,
Pakai foto aja Mbak, tadi pakai foto aja, makanya itu udah ada dokumentasi foto, itu aja.
Sip.
Baik kalau gitu semuanya, terima kasih atas waktunya.
Keren.
Mari.
Selamat malam.
Ini diingetin malam Jumat ya.
Apa coba? Lelean.
Setan malam Jumat. Pakai kemenyan.
Oke.
N ya. Yuk.
Oke.